Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm John Degree from Classical Historian. I'm very proud to introduce Jim Hodges from Jim Hodges Audiobooks, jimhodgesaudiobook.com. I met Jim probably 11 years ago, 10 years ago, doing the homeschool convention circuit, and um, always super nice guy, amazing person, and very interesting company. And we decided this year to team up and to do this online convention for you. And he's going to talk about just what he's best at, right? Recording these very interesting history books and talk to you a little bit about how you can use them to teach your children. And right now, I'm going to make him the host, and he's going to be taking over, and I'll be here in the background listening in uh, as well. So, all right, I believe now, Jim, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and let's see if that works.
There we
Uh,
go.
all right, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Well, it's afternoon here on the East Coast. I do want to welcome you. I have never given this talk before, so bear with me. I've been practicing it over and over for the last couple of days. I do record books and I'm used to speaking, but I'm also used to editing out my mistakes. So I won't be able to do that for this video and this training, but I do want to talk about the possibility of your being able to teach history to your kids and to yourself, actually, using historical fiction novels. So I want you to think back for a moment. Do you remember an historical event that you vividly remember learning about? Did you learn about it from a textbook, a list of facts, or was it a story that someone told you? The truth is, God made us and he wired us to resonate with stories. The Bible is a long story, 66 different chapters, but it's a long story. God knew that story was the way to communicate information to people well. Stories capture our hearts, our imagination, and they make lessons stick far longer than any textbook ever could, as far as I'm concerned. I love textbooks, don't get me wrong, but a story is much more engaging for me. So today I want to show you how every family, even yours, can teach history powerfully, beautifully, and affordably using almost nothing more than historical fiction novels. I'll also share why so many families are turning to our audio recordings to make history come alive for the entire household. But before I do all that, I want to tell you a story. It's a story from my own life. Every word of it is true. And I think you might find it really interesting. So I was raised in a nominally Christian home. The church we attended didn't emphasize, as far as I can recall, developing a personal relationship with Christ. We recited the Apostles' Creed and other memorized prayers, but they just didn't emphasize a personal connection to Jesus. I knew the facts, but I didn't have a relationship with him. Nevertheless, I considered myself to be a good person. We did go to church every Sunday. We had that imprimatur on us. I did want to please God, but being a Christian was not a part of who I was. I still believed in God. I knew he could direct me in my life, but I wasn't really following him, and far from it, in fact. I graduated high school. I took a year off to work to make some money to afford to be able to go to college. I did go to college for 1 year, and then I joined the Navy. In all this time, I was interested in finding a wife. I had quite a few female friends. I always felt more comfortable with the girls than the guys. The guys were just kind of, I don't know, they could be rude and crude, but anyway. And I had a couple of girlfriends, but nothing really serious in the way of relationships. But one day I remember talking to God, And I asked him the following. I said, "Hey God, we were buds. I'd really like to find a good woman to be my wife, but honestly, I don't know how to go about that. I've known lots of girls, spent time with a couple of them, but I really don't know who would be best for me in the long run. Would you mind taking that job off my hands? Just show me who she is. That would be great. Just show me who she is. I'm sure you can do that, and I would appreciate it if you would." So that was I didn't lay down any markers. I didn't promise anything. I just said, if you would do that for me, I would really be grateful because I want to make sure that I make the right choice. So after college, I joined the Navy. As I said, I went to boot camp, and then I went to Meridian, Mississippi for my school to be a personnel officer. After graduation from that class, we got our orders for our first duty assignment. And I got Naval Air Station, Kingsville, Texas. Now, what I joined the Navy for was to see the world. And to do that, I wanted a destroyer out of San Diego that would take me to Hawaii, the Philippines, Korea, maybe Australia, New Zealand, and other places in the Pacific Southwest. But I didn't get orders to a destroyer out of San Diego. I got orders to the southernmost point, practically, in flat, hot, dry, boring South Texas. The county was pretty much run by the King family of King Ranch. I don't know if you've seen the Ford F-150 trucks, King Ranch edition. That's where I was stationed. A friend of mine, however, got orders to a destroyer out of San Diego. So we talked about this at the end of the day there and realized, you can just ask the Navy to take my name off of this one and yours off of that one and swap them, and I'd get your orders and you'd get mine, and they'd be fine with that. And so we talked about it, and I said, "Dude, I would love to have a destroyer out of San Diego." And he said, "I would love to go to South Texas." So we decided that we were going to swap orders. We couldn't do it that day because everything was closed. So we'll do it tomorrow. Well, I had just given God the assignment of finding me a wife, not long before that. I was willing to listen to him about that. So the evening we all got our orders, I began to think, why not just let God decide about my orders too? Maybe there was a reason I got orders to Kingsville, Texas. So the next day, everybody gets up, you shower, you shave, you get your uniform on, you go to class. And as soon as I walked in the door, this friend of mine came up to me and said, "You changed your mind, didn't you?" And I asked him how he knew. He said, "I don't know. I just knew." And he was right. I decided I was going to take my orders to Kingsville, Texas. So I get to Kingsville, start my new job, and which ultimately turned into a 20-year career in the Navy. Made a couple of friends of my coworkers, one of whom was Leroy Delion. And I would love to run across him someday because this story is just so cool. And he insisted that he was Spanish. He was not Mexican. He was very adamant about that. "I'm not Mexican, I'm Spanish." I said, "All right, whatever." So Leroy and I got together one evening and decided we were just going to go to the club on the base and have dinner there instead of going to the chow hall. We could play some pool, have a couple of beers, whatever, just, young guys out for a relaxing evening. But on the way, we were headed, from the west down a sidewalk. And it turned out that as we were walking that direction, before we took our right-hand turn up the sidewalk to go into the club, there were these two young ladies walking towards us from the opposite direction. Well, one of them caught my attention. I nudged my friend Leroy with my elbow and I said, "Leroy, well, if you hang out to the end of the session, I'll tell you how that story ended. But what happened while I was talking to you? What happened while I was telling you that story? I hope you found it compelling. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it engaging, something you visualized as you were listening to it. I tried to give enough detail about the sidewalk and the club and lovely ladies coming towards us. And Leroy was Spanish. And I'm trying to give you those details, and you're picturing all of this, right? It was a story. And in this case, every word was true, and it happened to a real person, me. But my guess is you want to know how the story ended, right? Well, I'll tell you later. So here are some questions that would normally come up in your mind as you are reading an historical fiction novel or listening to an audiobook or hearing any kind of story at all. Your mind automatically, and more often than not, we're not even aware of these things happening, but they are happening. Again, that's the way God made us. He made us to resonate with story. So your brain automatically asks, what's going to happen next? And it gets suspenseful, and it encourages you to pay more attention because you want to know what happens next. Why did the character do that? Why did Jim say, God, will you take that off my hands? Well, I kind of told you, I didn't really feel qualified to find a wife on my own. So I asked for God's assistance with that. How would I react in that situation? If you were me, or if you were the young lady, or how would you have reacted? If you were a witness to all of this, what would your reaction have been to that? And that creates empathy and personal reflection. How would I have handled that? Did this really happen? It's another question you might be asking. In this case, I'm telling you, absolutely, this happened. And every word of that story is true. But it will also, if you're listening to a historical fiction novel or reading one, it will encourage you to do some investigation to determine what was fact and what was fiction in that story. Many authors of historical fiction will swap back and forth between the fictional characters' activities on his own account, and then also the next chapter will be his involvement in actual events that happened in history and teach you that. So it's often easy to tell the difference, but not always. And if you're not sure, then it will spark you to do some research. What was life really like back then? This story took place in 1979. Jimmy Carter was still president. We didn't have internet or cell phone or anything like the technology that we've got today. And when you ask the question, what was life really like back then? It invites further explanation of culture, politics, daily life. How did they dress? Bell bottoms, I'll have you know, and Levi's cords. Um, what did they eat for breakfast? How do they make a living? What weapons do they use? How do they defend themselves? How was their government organized? What was their house like? What did their house look like? How many rooms did it have? 1 story, 2 story? What was there? You start asking these kinds of questions as you're listening to the story. Was that normal or unusual for the time? Whatever the event is, whatever the behavior is that you encounter while you're reading these stories or listening to these stories, you might want to ask yourself, was that normal? Because if somebody did that today, that wouldn't go over well. So it just naturally causes you to ask that question. What was normal or unusual at that time? And it promotes critical thinking about change over time and societal norms. Was that right or wrong? It's a very good question to ask. Was that right or wrong? What that person did, what that person said, how that situation turned out, was that right or wrong? And that can open up deep conversations about justice and ethics and human nature. Would I have made the same choice? There's another question you might ask yourself while you're listening. And these things might be going on in the back of your mind because you're not really thinking about them, but they just kind of happen automatically. Would I have made the same choice? That personalizes the history and connects past decisions to modern dilemmas. Would I have made the same choice then? What would I have chosen now? How does this connect to what I already know? I did already read the textbook, story about the 30 Years' War or whatever. So does this book reinforce what I learned there? Or are there any contradictions, or is it just different perspectives on the same event? Because history is pretty much a clash of ideas, clash of cultures. That's what history is, the resolution of the clashes of the different cultures, the resolution of the belief systems at the time. And so most history is, unfortunately, the major events in history come about because wars are a result of them. And that's the clash of civilizations and the clash of ideas. What if this happened today? It stimulates creativity and real world comparisons. And how would I feel if I were them? If I were that young man or if I were that young lady in that circumstance, how would I have felt about that situation? All of these things just kind of bubble up from inside of us by nature, naturally, because God is a storyteller. God created us to resonate with stories, to see ourselves in stories, to visualize the story as we're hearing it. And so, story can teach a lot of things, and it's really good about teaching history. It just is, as my experience with my audiobook business has taught me. It's really, really helpful. So, how many of those questions came to your mind when you were listening to my story? Maybe not consciously, but in a way, very many of them probably came to your mind as you were listening to that story. So, story is one of the oldest and most powerful tools for learning. It just dawned on me yesterday as I was preparing this talk. Virtually all of life is stories, and I knew that part. I knew that part of the talk, but think about that. Every TV show is a story. Every commercial is a story. Every movie is a story. Every book, every song, practically every conversation that you have with other people is you telling a story from your perspective. They're telling their stories about the same thing. This happened to me. That happened to me too. It's all stories. That's what we do. That's how we communicate, is with stories. Human brains are wired for stories, memory, emotion, and understanding. And stories make complex ideas like historical movements and people relatable and unforgettable. So I was really kind of fascinated by this idea of story. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and realizing how much of our life, how much of my work is story. Of course, I do record stories, so it's even more so for me. But your life with your kids, teaching them, your life with them at piano practice or soccer, or this is your life, and the story of your life is the things that you do with your life. And other people in other cultures would find it fascinating. Um, I went to India on a mission trip a number of years ago for about 20 days. So it was kind of long, and we went to a number of different towns, and we were holding not evangelistic meetings, but we were training the pastors. I showed them pictures of my house. Their mouths fell open. Like, well, what? You have a whole house on what, 5 acres? That's like 2 hectares, 2.5 hectares, and that's all yours? And do I see 2 cars in your driveway? Yeah, yeah, I got 2 cars. We have air conditioning and we've got a refrigerator, and that was just like a story to them. They couldn't believe it. And I was looking at their living circumstances and thinking, that's a story for me. I can't believe it. But that's it. Story is how we communicate with each other. Story is how we learn from each other. And so the power of story is something that has just been kind of fascinating to me lately. And I try to be a good storyteller. I have been known to say that never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But in I'm very very serious that that entire story that I told you earlier, that's all true. So um, teaching history with almost nothing but historical fiction novels. Historical fiction novels blend factual history with compelling narratives. They immerse the reader or the listener emotionally, which makes history personal because they are involved at an experiential level, as in internally and in their minds. They're involved in that story. They're living in that time period because of this story is immersing them in that that time period and that event from history. And I'm not saying that any curricula and textbooks are bad. Far from it. They're not. In fact, they can be very helpful to present history chronologically and to provide a great check on what you are learning. If you do want a textbook in addition to historical fiction, I would recommend John Degree's The Classical Historian. Great site, lots of good stuff. He's a history teacher and has many resources using games and the Socratic method of questions and answers. Linda Hobar's The Mystery of History, Knotgrass History, they're all great history curriculum. They really are. They provide print and audio editions of their books as well and utilize more of a story base to their curriculum. But again, if I've got an audio book about Drake circumnavigating the globe, which I do, it's 10 hours long. How long's the entry in any history textbook about Drake circumnavigating the globe? It's not 10 hours worth of reading. So the history books are great for the timeline and for the overview of history, and you learn lots of facts. That's all true. And I don't mean to take anything away from that. But when you can take a singular event and really drill down in it through an historical fiction novel, that brings it more to life than a standard textbook could. I would recommend getting a timeline for your wall. That was one of the best purchases we ever made with Konos, which was a curriculum that we used in the very, very, very beginning of our homeschool journey with our kids. But it was just plastic strips with the date at the beginning and the end, and they were color coded by century, and you just kind of tape them to your wall. And what we would do is anytime we learned about a new historical event, we'd have the kids either draw or find a picture that represented that historical event to them, and they would just put it on the timeline. And after you do that for 12 years of homeschooling, or however long that is, you're going to have a really good look at the overview of world history or any events that you've ever read about in world history, because you put them on that timeline and you can see the hand of God moving across the centuries. It's really, really, really helpful to get a timeline. You can use lap books to chronicle the information and to capture the information that you learned in that audiobook or in that historical fiction novel that you've read. What were they wearing? What was their living quarters like? What would they eat? Where were they on a map? And you just put all of the different pieces of information that you've learned about in that book in one of those lap books that kind of folds in on itself on a trifold. And lots of people have got lap books available for that type of schooling. There are plenty of states that require some documentation, and to listen to an audiobook or read a historical fiction novel, there's nothing that you can show to somebody who would be looking for some evidence of what you learned this year. So these are ways that you can have the kids write a book report about the story that they just heard or read. There's a lot of ways that you can document if you need to, but the point is getting involved in the story, getting involved with the people of that time frame and history, and feeling and sensing and seeing with your mind what life was like at that time and the historical event that the book is covering. So there's a lot of ways that you can use audiobooks and meld them with other methods of learning, and that's always a good thing too, because different kids learn different ways. Why are customers choosing audio historical fiction? Historical fiction books and audio really bring the story to life. The tone of voice of the reader, the pace at which he's reading these particular words, the pause and emphasis and the lilt of your voice add extra layers of meaning. And I always find it entertaining when I think about the pause. There's a great little meme going around Facebook, or did for a while, and it said, commas save lives, something like that. And the three words that follow are "let's eat grandma." And that's one way to read that. But if you put a comma after eat, then it's "let's eat grandma." And that pause, that little bit of pause, totally changes the meaning of the sentence. The three words are the same, but boy, totally different meanings. And I do get complimented by listeners about my reading style, my presentation of the written words that are on that book. My goal is always to read it out loud as if it is the author of the book doing the actual reading. I want to get in the head of the author. How did he mean for this to sound? And I think I do a pretty good job of it. People seem to like it. I've been doing it for 25 years and making a living at it for all that time. So I guess there's something good going on. Audiobooks are ideal for busy families. Learn while driving, doing chores, during the lunch hour, or winding down at night. The best story that I ever heard from a mom about how she used the audiobooks in her family's homeschool was this. Okay, Jim, we get your latest audiobook, and the first day we get it, during lunch that day, I put the CD on, or I put the chapter on, and I play chapter one during lunch. All of my chapters are roughly 30 to 40 minutes long. In that 30-minute time, the kids can make a sandwich and eat it or whatever, but we're all focusing in on that story. And we only listen to one chapter a day, and it's always during lunch. The next day we do chapter two, same thing, until the whole book is done. And then as soon as everybody in the family has heard the entire book, then we have to decide who's going to get it to listen to on their own. But I thought that was just a great way to implement it somewhat naturally into the course of your homeschool day. Always do it at the same time, always do it at lunch, always do it after dinner, whatever works for you, whatever your always is, always in the car. But I did a survey with my customers, and I asked them, why do you buy Jim Hodges audiobooks? What's your reason for buying Jim Hodges audiobooks? And I gave them 13 options to choose from. And I'm going to go through the list from the bottom to the top to let you know how other people are using them and why. As a nap or a bedtime story, only 18 people picked that. I actually thought it would be more because, you lay down, you put a story on. That's not a bad idea. But then the problem is you fall asleep or you can't fall asleep because you're so engaged in the story. So maybe that's why not too many people voted for that one. 23 people chose because my child has learning disabilities and following along in the text helps. I always do unabridged recordings, every word that the original author wrote. So you can pick up the book and follow along in the text if you would like, or you can listen to it. Because as far as your brain is concerned, listening is reading. It's just words getting in by another means. So you are reading the book when you're listening to an audiobook. 34 people chose because the kids find the sound of Jim's voice soothing and expressive. Well, thank you. 37 people chose, I want to teach my children excellent writing skills by listening to good writing. Well, that's Andrew Pudewa's mantra. Garbage in, garbage out. Good quality literature in, good quality writing comes out. 48 people chose because my children are auditory learners. Well, of course, I'm not an auditory learner at all. In fact, the one time I tried to listen to an audiobook on a very long drive to a convention, I had to force myself to pay attention. It did not come naturally to me. I'm easily distracted. And so that's why a documentary is best for me, or a book, because it locks my eyes in on something and I can't be distracted. 49 people chose as a substitute for screen time and TV. Yeah, exactly. 54 people said to inspire my kids to emulate the heroes in the stories. Now, the Henty novels, which we'll get to in a minute, is what I record primarily. I describe the protagonist, young male hero character in all of those books as every mother's dream son. He's just the finest young man you'd ever want to meet. And he just displays good character all the time. In his relationships with peers, his relationships with authorities and those younger than him, and in all ways, he just does the right thing all the time. And that's a great thing to have modeled. 58 people said to increase my kids' vocabulary, by listening to words that are above their reading level. So I learn new vocabulary words every Henty book that I record, and I've recorded, I think, 35 of them. I'm always learning new words because his vocabulary is unbelievable. You could make a dictionary out of my vocabulary lists of Henty words. They're just crazy. And how do we learn new words as people? We hear it used a few different times, appropriately and in context, and that's how we learn new words. Well, Henty's using this advanced vocabulary all the time. And so your kids are hearing these same words and phrases over and over. And by golly, I've had parents tell me, I can't believe the words that are coming out of my kid's mouth because I don't use them, but they do. One mom told me her son was very excited about going outside and doing something with his brothers. And he said, well, let's sally out and go to the garden. You know, it's like, well, who says sally out? Well, Henty does. So this young man picked it up and wanted to use it. 83 people, because it's something the whole family can do together. And that is so true. I once gave a talk at a convention where I just put the CD player on the table, put a CD in it, hit the play button and let it play for a minute, just 1 minute. Then I turned it off and I said, okay, so who's the best reader in the room? Can anybody tell? No. Who's the smartest person in the room? No. Who's best at baseball? Nothing else matters. When everybody's listening to the same audiobook, you're all on the same page at the same time. Nobody's bigger, better, anything. It's a beautiful thing, honestly. 102 people to model good character to my kids. We already did that, kind of. 109 people. I thought this would be number one, honestly, because I can only read so much to my kids and I want Jim to do it. So they're honest. I was number 3 on the list. Number 2, at 111 votes, to make good use of otherwise downtime, like driving to appointments, that downtime in the car. Goodness, audiobooks in the car. The kids will quit bickering with each other. It's a great thing. It's a great thing to have in the car. Number 1 reason, 170 votes, to teach history to my kids in a fun way. I didn't know that. I thought it was because I can only read so much and I want Jim to do it. No, they were teaching history to their kids in a fun way. It's exactly what audiobooks do. And audiobooks to me is not just audiobooks, but anyway, I've got old time radio shows and things like that. So not just historical fiction, I mean. So those are the reasons that my customers, that my existing customers, why are you buying from me? That's what they told me. Audiobooks create shared family experiences. We're not just learning, we're bonding. They appeal to all ages. They're just a great resource. And there's so much good historical fiction out there. And I'm only going to talk about my own. I can't go into all the other stuff that's available, but let's talk about how people listen to how they're using the recordings. Long road trips. Yeah, it's a history lesson without the kids even realizing it. I have been told at least half a dozen times, so who knows how many times it actually happened, by parents saying, Jim, I got a story, Jim, you wouldn't believe this. And I'm thinking, I probably will. But we drove from, Missouri to the North Carolina coast, and we got to Grandma's house, and we were like towards the end of this chapter, and the kids have been in the car for 10 hours, and we're all just can't wait to get out of the car until we got and pulled into Grandma's driveway. And the kids are like, no, don't turn it off. We need to know what happened at the end of this chapter. They're like, you're kidding me. You don't want to get out of the car? No, I want to finish the story. So that really does happen with kids. They love the stories, and they're willing to be inconvenienced even further if they can hear the rest of it. Evening family time. One family said, Jim, you're part of our evening routine. We do dinner, we do the dishes, we sit down in front of the fireplace in the winter, and we put on Jim Hodges audiobooks, and we all listen to another chapter. Homeschool routines. It's an effortless integration into history studies. Like I said, during the lunchtime, or one set time every day that you're going to listen to another chapter. I will tell you that on my website, all the way at the bottom. The website's jimhodgesaudiobooks.com. All the way at the bottom, towards the right, it says in white letters, um, chronological listing of all titles. So it's like the 22-page document. But just on this one page, in 1517, there's a story called The Old Fox Got Away, and that's about John Fox, the guy who wrote Fox's Book of Martyrs. It's in the book, and I list the title of the book that it's in, God's Mighty Hand. And then there's a code. It's got an M and an H, which means it's appropriate for middle and high school students. The next line, 1518 to 1523, by right of conquest, Cortez conquers the Aztecs. That's a G.A. Henty audiobook. It's an entire book. It's my favorite. It's 13 hours and 19 minutes long. And it too is okay for middle and high school. The next book talks about the death of Montezuma, which is related to Cortez. But that's in the You Are There old-time radio show that reenacted world history and US history in a radio program. And that's appropriate for middle and high school. We've got that recording on our website too. Next comes Martin Luther. So while Cortez is conquering the Aztecs, Martin Luther is starting in the 1920s. He is the story of a spy for the Night Riders. Now that's a trailblazer book written by Dave and Nita Jackson that I've been able to record on their behalf. And so now you're learning about Martin Luther. Then comes Hernando de Soto. He's in a different book. All of these stories are in different books. 10 Great Adventurers by Amy Pitts. Then the next one is William Tyndale. Oh, pardon me. Then Kofachiki. That's in 10 Girls from History. So I've got all of these books, and this list, if you're learning your history, you can find on this list stories related to or very close to what you're learning about in your history. And then it tells you what audio to get and who it's appropriate for, early, elementary, middle, or high school. So that's a great resource right on the website, bottom right-hand corner, chronological listing of all the recordings. And then I do want to talk to you about my primary author that I record, and that's George Alfred Henty. He was born in 1832, 1832, and lived until 1902. He was Cambridge educated. He became a reporter for the newspapers in London. They sent him all over the world to report on the communist uprising in Paris, in the opening of the Suez Canal, during the Civil War in Italy in the mid-1800s. He met Peter the Great. I mean, he traveled all over Europe. I know he was in the United States. He went to the California gold mines. He crossed the country on once train travel was available. He went everywhere. And after his writing career for the newspapers, he started writing historical fiction novels. He wrote 122 of them. I have 37 of them recorded. So I only have, 70 to go. That's a lot. But let me tell you some of the events from history that those 37 stories cover. Ancient Egypt, Hannibal and the Punic Wars, Rome, gladiators, persecution of the Christians, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, the Viking invasion, the Norman conquest, the Crusades, the Braveheart story, the 100 Years' War, a story about Venice defending itself against its neighbor, the Wat Tyler Peasant Rebellion, the Welsh Rebellion. The Welsh rise up. They're very proud people against their British overlords, and it gets crushed. The 100 Years' War, the Siege of Rhodes, Cortez conquering the Aztecs. We already mentioned that. The religious wars in France, Drake circumnavigating the globe, the 80 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, the English Civil War, when London burned in 1666, with Wolfe in Canada. That's the French and Indian War. The 7 Years' War, which is this French and Indian War, taking place in Europe. We've got that covered. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, Napoleon's defeat in Russia, the Battle of Waterloo, his final defeat, the Industrial Revolution, the Luddite riots, settling Australia, the tale of the coal mines in England, the California Gold Rush, westward expansion, settling Argentina, the Crimean War, and the US Civil War. That's a lot of history. That's a whole lot of history. And that's just the Henty novels. I haven't even mentioned, although I will now, um, the David Nita Jackson Trailblazer books. I did mention them. We've got William Bradford, Hudson Taylor, David Livingston, George Mueller, The Salvation Army, Amy Carmichael, Gladys Aylward, Nate Saint, William Tyndale, Martin Luther. As you can see, we're covering a lot of history in these audiobooks, and every title that I've mentioned so far is historical fiction. A fictional character is created, connected in some way, shape, or form with this named person from history, and you learn about this famous person from history through the eyes of this younger person who gets connected with them tangentially. And that is a fictional character. Everybody knows that. They're fine with that. But what we learn about these people, what we learn about these events is through the eyes of this fictional character. And you talk about a great way to learn history. Just tell me a story. Tell me a story. By the way, I asked John to remind me, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you myself. Here's the rest of the story. Leroy, Delion, and I are walking to the club from this direction. Two young ladies are walking towards us from the opposite direction. We know we're both going to go to the club. I elbowed Leroy and I said, Leroy, there she is. And he said, who's that? And I said, that's my wife. He said, really? What's her name? I said, I have no idea. This is the first time I've ever laid eyes on her, but that's the girl I'm going to marry. And we recently celebrated our 45th anniversary. I still see that lovely young lady every time I see my wife. We're still in love with each other, and that love grows more and more every day. That's a true story. So, John, you're welcome to come back in if you'd like. I think I've covered everything, and I've had a great time, and I hope you did too. John, I never let others in.
Yes.
I didn't even think of it. Sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. I don't know. I don't think there are extra ones there, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. That was amazing
Oh,
story.
good.
But what's crazy is that I didn't know you got married when you were 10 years old. Looks so good.
No,
It's
not
the best
exactly.
possible way.
I made a really wise decision in relation to that. Not only did I get the girl who I'm just head over heels in love with her still. I wisely married her exactly 1 week after my birthday. So if my birthday's on a Wednesday, I know the next Wednesday is going to be my anniversary, so I never forget.
Wonderful. So, are there any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. What happened? As to unmute. Let's see. You have to unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
I never turn mine off. I hope you guys have all been able to hear that.
Yes. Oh, they were. We heard you. We
Okay,
heard
good.
you perfectly. We heard you perfectly.
Good,
Uh,
good, good.
so are there any questions for Jim Hodges? It's jimhodgesaudiobook.com.
Uh,
Yes, go ahead. Coral,
Reedon
unmute
Stodlinger,
yourself
I
there.
hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Streaming is not available yet. However, I'm glad you asked. This month, if you go to my website and join the Download a Month Club, on June 1st, everybody who's in the Download a Month Club, it's $5.99 a month. We put it on sale. You pay $5.99, but you get a coupon for $18, and then you can come back and can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
So you pay $5.99 a month, but you get a coupon worth $18. Every download is $18, period, flat out. Whether it's an hour long or my longest is 16 hours long. But on June 1st, everybody who's in the Download a Month Club is going to be offered the opportunity to sign up for free for the streaming service for 6 months. It'll be good for an entire 6 months. So, but you have to stay a member of the club for the whole 6 months, but you'll be able to stream everything until the end of this year. And what we want to do is get you people, the beta testers, basically, make sure everything works. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like. And then January 1st of next year, we're going to release the streaming service company wide. Because I know streaming is next. I started off with cassettes, for crying out loud. I skipped right over CDs and went to MP3 CDs. And we got rid of the CDs last year and went straight downloads. And now we're going streaming. So I'm glad you asked, Raiden. Whoops, sorry. I'm glad you asked that question because I really wanted to share that and had forgotten to do so. I got so involved in the story I was telling that I forgot to really, promote myself in that way.
And we have a question from Coral.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can. Yeah.
Okay. Jim, we've been using your stuff for like 6 years. I met you in Nashville. And so it's
I know your name, Coral. I know your name.
Okay. Well, we started when my daughter was 4, and now she'll be starting 5th grade. So
Okay.
she's probably ready for the middle school.
Yeah.
But my son, he's still little. I wonder if you have a suggestion on bringing that middle school stuff in. Keep it away from the youngers or incorporate it with the youngers.
How old is he?
He's 8. He did okay with By England's Aid.
Did he really?
And,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. There's 2 Henty novels in particular that I typically recommend as quote unquote starter Henties. Under Drake's Flag is one of them, and that's Drake circumnavigates the globe. The reason I recommend that is because it jumps right to the story very quickly. There's 90% adventure, 10% history. So it's a great intro, and kids will go, oh man, I love those Henty stories because there's so much adventure. The other one that I recommend for a starter is The Dragon and the Raven, because it's only 7 hours and 40 minutes long. So that's a shorter Henty novel. It does take until the 2nd chapter or so before the story really gets going. So I would also tell my kids, and yours has already listened to one and did fine with it, so I don't really need to tease him along. But what I would tell parents is make sure your kids listen to at least 3 chapters of a Henty novel before they give up on it, because by then the story's really kind of started to move along and they're going to be more engaged in it than if they listen to 5 minutes of the first chapter and they go, I don't even know what they're talking about, which is true because sometimes you don't. But that's why it impels you to read the rest of the story to find out what is going on and make a little bit more sense of it. So those would be 2 starters. And if he's 8 and he's already listened to one Henty and he was okay with it, go ahead and hit him up with those 2. I would suggest, and they're different time periods of history, but they're both great stories, and then see how he does with them. I will say that both of them, along with about 30 of the Henty titles, actually have study guides that go with them. They're another $12 on top, but there's an assignment for every chapter. There's vocabulary lists for every chapter. There's a quiz every 5 chapters. And the answer keys in the back for you, Mom. And that's a PDF download. So if you are looking for some documentation as to what they learned while they were listening to or reading this book, that's a great way to go too.
Great. Yeah, we have the study guide for By England's Aid. And
perfect.
I guess I didn't realize the answers were in the back because those were some tough questions.
Oh my. That's funny. Hopefully nobody else knew they were back there and you can tear them out or, make sure that they're kept in a secure location somewhere while the kids are actually answering the questions. But yeah, there is an answer key in the back.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you take your other questions. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Coral. John, you're back.
Yes. So I don't see a chat question right now. If anybody has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or chat it. Tristan says, thank you so much. Raiden Stoudinger says, I have 4 young boys and they love your Henty books. So excited for the streaming option.
Oh, that's great.
I'm a member of the Download a Month Club, so this is exciting.
Perfect. I'm so glad. I would love to. I did send out an email on the 1st of this month to inviting people to join that Download a Month Club so that they can get that streaming service for 6 months. Because my goodness, who doesn't want that? It's one thing to have the download on your phone or wherever, But to be able to, but to be able to just log into a streaming service and and pick any title that you want, and it'll hold your place on the title because you'll create an account on the site, and it's a different site from mine. We had to set it up because my WordPress site doesn't have a plugin that will allow streaming. So we had to set it up on a different site, but we will give you the login to get to that site for free for 6 months. And you can just listen to anything you want for the next 6 months. It's a great offer. But of course you do need to be a member of the Download Club. And if you unsubscribe, then we're going to take away your login for the streaming service, but that's okay.
One Ryan Stoudinger has a suggestion. You should read the Ralph Moody books.
I have, but I've not recorded them. They're still under copyright protection, and the copyright is 95 years. So next year, January 1, will be anything that was published in 1930 or earlier will be public domain. I did start recording just a couple years ago the Hardy Boys book, the original Hardy Boys books. 3 of them were published in 1927, 3 in 1928, 2 in 1929, and all 8 of those are available on my website as downloads now. But if you open up one of the Blue Jacket Hardy Boys books, you're not going to be able to follow along because they rewrote everything in the 60s. And they're just not the same. You have to have the original 1927, 28, 29 edition to be able to follow along in the text. But if you go to Gutenberg.net, anybody ever heard of that? They post text editions of out of copyright books. People volunteer to literally type them up and upload them, and then somebody else proofs it, and then they post it so that you can have the unabridged text. So if you want to follow along with Swiss Family Robinson or Mark Twain's Joan of Arc, both of which I've recorded, you can go to Gutenberg.net, type in the title of the book or the author, and download the text. You could either print it out or you could have it on your phone. It's a text document, so any computer will be able to read it. And now you can follow along in the text, and you don't even have to have the book in your hand.
That's amazing.
I know. Yes, Reedon just wrote she was going to have her son follow along in the Hardy Boys with one of the newer books, and she's like, "Oh, thanks for letting me know that he's not going to be able to do that." But,
that's good.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
I always record, unless somebody hires me to record a book for them, which they've done, and there's, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them in there that I have recorded just as a work for hire. Excuse me. You're going to have to buy the book. If it's out of copyright, that's a different animal. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to find it on Gutenberg and be able to follow along. Just look really carefully at the. My wife was considering recording some Nancy Drew books, which I think she would be really, really good at. So I went to Abe Books and tried to find them, and they were, all of them said, copyright 1932, 33, 34. It's like, oh, great. So I bought, half a dozen of them. Every one of them came back and said, well, yeah, originally it was copyrighted in 1932, but this is the redo. And so I wrote all of them back because they came from different districts. And I was like, dude, your listing says it's the copyright 1932 edition. It's not, it's 1956. Oh, sorry. Next time send us an email and we'll double check. Like, okay, maybe if you're a book dealer, you should know that the latest copyright is the one that matters, but I digress. So we weren't able to get them just yet, but we'll get to that someday.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming to this talk, and I'm really glad I was here, Jim. I'm going to go ahead.
I'm glad you were here too, John.
Stop the recording at the moment, and this will be probably sent out to all of you who signed up for it. But thank you very much for coming.